It's day 106 of 118 days with the Tudors, and today we're thinking about 1590. And in this year, there are witch trials in Scotland, and we're going to be thinking about them. These are the North Berwick witch trials that occur in 1590. Now, just to preface this by saying, when I was researching this, I read an account written for the BBC, and I read an account written for National Heritage. They differed slightly, so I've tried to construct kind of the best fit of the different accounts I read. So if anyone's got any extra information, feel free to drop it in the comments, much appreciated. Also want to preface this by saying, when we think about the witch trials, the early modern witch trials, we quite often think of what happened in Salem in America. That's kind of the iconic witch trial situation. However, while that is still important and horrific, we need to bear in mind 20 people died at Salem. In the European witch trials, in total, 50,000 people died. It's really important that we take note of the fact that this wasn't just a sort of a one-off thing in Salem and a few witches burned here and there in Scotland and England. This was a huge problem and a huge massacre. So we're thinking about Scotland today, and we're thinking about one small area of Scotland that ended up in the persecution of between 70 and 200 people. In modern times, this area is often considered one of the best and nicest places to live in Scotland, but it does have this brutal past to it. So as I said, the witch trials were a broader picture. Scotland saw the death of around 4,000 people for witchcraft. But in this area alone, we're looking at between 70 and 200. Now, how this comes about is, and as I said, I'm kind of combining accounts here, but James VI is on the throne in Scotland, and he is going off to meet his new bride, Anne of Denmark. Now, there is some difficulty on the way. Terrible storms. It either made him turn back or it made him meet Anne somewhere different. So terrible storms, and he believes there's unnatural causes for this, and when he eventually comes back to England with Anne, there are storms again. Now, he is blaming witchcraft for these storms and looking around for people to accuse, and he focused in on the people who lived in North Berwick and decided that there were witches there who were trying to kill him. Now, James's hatred and fear of witches was well known, and it even is referenced by Shakespeare. It's thought that James's book, so he wrote a book on witches, and it's believed that that inspired the witches in Shakespeare's Macbeth. So an investigation was held into the people of North Berwick. It suggested that the church there is where the witches met up and had their meetings and conjured up Satan. Oh, lots of people, mostly women, were interrogated, tortured, and then invariably produced confessions, which they tried to then retract later on. But what tended to happen was these people would be tortured. They'd admit to being a witch, to trying to kill James, but through the torture they would then name somebody else, because that's what the interrogators wanted. So it would snowball, and more people would be pulled into this. Now, what it was suggested and what they managed to get people to confess that they'd done was throw cats into the sea to cause this storm. Now, one account says that people confessed to digging up the graves in the churchyard, removing the limbs from bodies, attaching them to the cats and throwing them in the sea. Another account said that they were christening the cats and throwing them in the sea. Either way, there's this strange thing around throwing cats into the ocean to create the storm which was supposed to kill James VI. One of the most famous people who were accused of witchcraft was Agnes Sampson, and supposedly James spoke to her himself, and she had knowledge of secret conversations he had had, and that went against her. Agnes Sampson was a well-known midwife in the area. Midwives could tend to get accused of witchcraft, although it's not as high a proportion as you might imagine, but because sometimes people would accuse them if they had given birth and their child had died and they were looking for some blame, sometimes the midwife can get pulled into that, or anybody associated with healing. That's what's happened in North Berwick. I won't go on and on about the witch trials. It's a fascinating topic, although a harrowing one. If you would like me to speak more about them in the future, do let me know, because like I say, they're fascinating but difficult listening, difficult reading. So 1590, we've got the North Berwick witch trials. Around 70 people are executed for witchcraft. It may have been more, and this is brought into the number of 4,000 in total killed for witchcraft in Scotland. And then we've got that overall number of the European witch trials as large, 50,000 people, and around 85% of those were women. The remaining 15% were men and children. So I will see you tomorrow for 1591, when we are going to spend a year with Elizabeth. So put on something nice. See you then.